Hi, Doc Martin for the Zero Channel with another book review, and what a great book. It's 770 pages, but sometimes, when you want the definitive answers, when you really want to know, go to the experts and learn. Well, this book's about John Quincy Adams, and it's by Randall Woods, A Man for the Whole People. What an excellent book. And it's a great read. I couldn't put it down, it takes a few days to read, but well worth it. And if you want to know some history, well, Randall Woods is your guy. It's from Dutton. And there's a picture of Randall Woods. He is a distinguished professor of history at the University of Arkansas, where he has taught since 1971. His books include LBJ, Architect of American Ambition, and Fulbright, a biography, which won the Robert H. Farrell Book Prize. An amazing story. A magisterial journey through the epic life and transformative times of John Quincy Adams. He was the son of the second president, James Adams. In this masterful biography, historian Randall Woods peels back the many layers of John Quincy's long life, exposing a rich and complicated family saga and political legacy that transformed the American Republic. Born the first son of John and Abigail William Adams, he was pressured to follow in his father's footsteps in both law and politics. His boyhood was spent amid the fervor of the American Revolution, and as a teen, he assisted his father on diplomatic missions in Europe, hobnobbing with monarchs and statesmen, dining with Ben Franklin, and sitting by Voltaire at the opera. He received a world-class education, becoming fluent in Latin, Greek, German, and French. His astonishing intellect and poise would lead to a diplomatic career of his own, in which he'd helped solidify his fledgling nation's standing in the world. John Quincy was entwined with every famous American of his day, from Washington to Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Calhoun, Clay, and Webster. He was on stage, frequently front and center during the Revolutionary era, the fractious birth of American party politics, the War of 1812, the era of good feelings, and the peak of continental expansion. It was against this backdrop that he served as an ambassador, senator, secretary of state, and unhappily as president. The driving forces behind the Transcontinental Treaty and the Monroe Doctrine, this champion of manifest destiny spent his last years of his life fighting against the annexation of Texas because it would facilitate the spread of slavery. This deeply researched, brilliantly written volume delves into John Quincy's intellectual pursuits and political thought. His loving yet at times strained marriage to Louisa Catherine Johnson, whom he met in London, his troubling relationships with his three sons, and his fiery post-presidency rebirth in Congress as he became the chamber's most vocal opponent of slavery. This book is what you would call a seminal work. It is wonderful. It is absolutely the last word. There isn't anything more that you could learn about James Quincy Adams after reading Dr. Woods' history here. It's so well concisely, being a distinguished professor of history, you would expect that. But it sure opened my eyes about it. I always like to read about presidents and what I thought about them and stuff, and I don't know, sad to say or not, but sometimes your opinion changes about people, and but what you got to work with is what you have, and the way it is, you can't change history. You think you might, but no, the way it happened is the way it is. So John Quincy Adams, he was, his father, well, they were Puritans, came over early, and the ancestors of Adams were some of the first people in America. But they were staunch, he was staunchly religious, his father was, and he read the Bible all the time, but his father really pressed him to get a classical education. And so, I mean, you know, when they're 14 years old, he's going to Harvard. He ended up being the first professor of rhetoric and oration there in Harvard. I think his brother became president or something like that. It's just an enduring story. But the things that he had to go through, and the manipulations, and saving us from a hair's breadth of. But, you know, here's the one thing my takeaway was, is that he knew in 1807 that to get rid of slavery was going to be a bloody, bloody trail. And it was. It happened after him. He passed away on February 23rd, 1848. Well, he was making a speech on the floor of the Congress. But what a long life. He lived to be 75 or somewhere in there. It's just an amazing, amazing story. But he was a constitutionalist. That's the main thing is, you know, so many people wanted to drop out and holler states' rights at the least infraction or because they didn't get their way. You know, the slave owners, it was terrible. And the British would always pit one another, and yet they were the first. In 1808 they started, and then really, in the late 20s and first 30s of 1830s, they really made a law against slavery and outlawed it in the British realm. So in 1833 it was finalized. But they would encourage blacks to come over during the war and stuff, and they negotiated for reparations and recompensation and all. And the expansionists, he was in when Monroe made the 1803 purchase of the Louisiana Purchase, and even though he was not, and he was vehement against slavery, he really felt though that white people were probably more superior. So he knew he made a lot of mistakes, but he should be forgiven for many things because he did watch out for the country in a lot of ways, and it's because of John Quincy Adams that a lot of things in America that got done, like the the Oregon Territory, and he knew we were going to go to war with Mexico because of the expansionist problems and all that, and I don't know. He didn't like the way Jackson removed the Indians and had the Indian removal because, you know, Jackson took over from after he was president, and he never tried to make another bid again. But he couldn't get out of politics. He just had to stay busy, and but his biggest things were doing. He was a ambassador or a diplomat, minister to Soviet Union. To Russia, in Belgium or Holland. He went to England, and his father, when he was young, he went with his father to St. James Court. So he was just all over the place. He was always, always, always in the public eye. And he wrote, and he said he really kept up his his diary. And then in the end, it says that he wrote over 7,000 pages. Now this is 700. So can you imagine a diary 10 times this size that he wrote in? They said that his forefinger and thumb were permanently stained with ink. So he just wrote all the time, and that's how they communicated. It just took time for letters to get back to one another and all. His wife lost, I don't know, 4 or 5 children in pregnancies. They had a lot of stillbirths, and they lost a young child. But he did have sons, but he rode them as hard as his dad rode him. And because of that, a couple of his sons were belligerent, ran through fortunes, died prematurely from alcoholism and all. Just the normal family tragedies, you know. But he wasn't unlike anybody else, but he was well honored and liked, and he took a lot of tours around the United States when he was older, and he was mobbed by so many people that did like him, you know, in the North. And he was so well traveled. He had to go to France, I think. And so his wife had to come from Russia all the way through those countries by stage. And it took her 40 days to get there, and she barely made it. It was a horrendous journey. But she just missed him all the time because, you know, there were times when he was gone 8 years, 6 years, 4 years at a time. You know, he didn't come home for a while. But he did help form this nation, for better or worse, and I think probably it was for the best. He's to be forgiven for a few things and overlooked for some, and the trying of the times, well, we are what we are, and be thankful that we're here today so that I can tell you this story about a great American who really was there for all of it, for all of us, and from America. Thanks for watching. KRAZ-TV and the Zero Channel, and get this book like you can. I got it at the Tucson-Pima County Public Library. You can probably get it at yours. Thank you for watching, and keep reading. And remember, freedom is hard-won and precious to keep.